Princess Jathira stood before the massive window of her father's throne room, staring at the stars beyond. Her reflection showed a tall woman covered in deep blue scales that shimmered like sapphires. Her golden eyes held worry and anger. Behind her, Emperor Calvin sat on his throne, silent and unmovable. "I will not do this, father," Jathira said, her voice tight with frustration. "You cannot ask this of me." "I am not asking," the emperor replied. His voice was calm but firm. "I am telling you what must be done. The Calvary Empire needs this alliance." Jathira turned to face him. "An alliance with humans? Father, they are barely civilized. They have only been in space for 200 years. They live such short lives that they cannot even plan properly for the future. They are violent and emotional, and completely unpredictable." The emperor rose from his throne, his own dark red scales catching the light. He was old, nearly 350 years, and his wisdom showed in his careful movements. He walked to his daughter and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You speak of what you have been told, not what you know," he said. "Yes, humans are young as a spacefaring race. Yes, they are different from us. But they control the trade routes through the Orion Arm. Without access to those routes, our economy will collapse. Our people will suffer. Do you want that?" "There must be another way," Jathira protested. "There is not. We have tried negotiations. We have tried trade agreements. They want a permanent bond between our peoples. This marriage will give us that." He paused, looking into her eyes. "I know this is not what you wanted for your life, but you are a princess of the Calvary. Sometimes we must sacrifice our desires for our people." Jathira closed her eyes. She had always known that her marriage would be arranged. It was the way of royal families across the galaxy. But she had hoped to marry a Calvari noble, or perhaps a warrior from one of the allied species. Not a human. The stories about humans terrified her. They were said to be aggressive and warlike, having fought 3 major conflicts in just the past 50 years. Their emotions ruled them, making them unreliable. They formed attachments quickly and broke them just as fast. Their short lives made them reckless, always rushing toward danger without proper thought. "When must I meet him?" she asked quietly, accepting her fate. "In 3 days. At Epsilon Station, the neutral ground between our territories." Jathira nodded and left the throne room. Her mind raced as she walked through the crystal corridors of the palace. 3 days. 3 days until she met the creature she would be bound to for the rest of his short life. She went to her chambers and activated her computer. If she must do this, she would at least learn about her future husband. His name was James Chun, a commander in the Terran Diplomatic Corps. The file showed a man with dark hair and brown eyes, his skin a light tan color. He looked strange to her without scales or proper defensive features. So vulnerable and soft, the file said he was 42 years old. For a human, that meant he was already past the middle of his life. He had served in the human military before joining the diplomatic service. He had been married before, with a daughter. Both had died in something called the Proxima Colony attack, one of the wars that had brought humanity to the attention of the Calvary Empire. Jathira studied his face in the image. He looked tired, sad. She wondered what it was like to know you would only live perhaps 80 or 90 years at most. How could anyone plan or dream when time moved so quickly? The next 3 days passed too fast. Jathira barely ate or slept. She practiced the formal greetings she would need to give. She chose her ceremonial armor carefully, the one with silver trim that showed her royal status. She wanted to look strong and powerful, to show this human that she was not weak. The journey to Epsilon Station took only a few hours by shuttle. Jathira sat in silence, her attendants knowing better than to speak to her. She could feel her heart beating too fast in her chest. Fear and disgust mixed together inside her when the shuttle docked. Her chief attendant, an older Kelvari woman named Shira, touched her arm gently. "Courage, princess," Shira said softly. "Remember who you are. Remember what you carry on your shoulders." Jethera nodded and stood. She was tall, nearly 7 feet in height, as was normal for Kelvari females. She wondered how tall the human would be. The file had said 6 feet, which seemed small to her. The doors opened, and she walked into the meeting hall. The room was decorated in neutral colors, neither Kelvari nor human in style. Several diplomats from both sides stood along the walls, watching. And in the center of the room stood the human. James Chum looked exactly like his picture, but somehow different in person. He wore a simple dark suit, formal but not military. He stood straight and still, his hands at his sides. His face showed no emotion, which surprised her. She had expected him to look afraid or angry or something as she approached. He bowed in the perfect Kelvari formal greeting, the kind used when meeting royalty. Not the simplified version that most aliens learned, but the full, proper bow that took years to master. "Princess Yathira," he said in flawless Kelvari, his accent nearly perfect. "I am honored to meet you. Thank you for coming." Yathira stopped, caught completely off guard. She had expected broken Kelvari at best, or more likely that they would speak in Galactic Common, the trade language. But this human spoke her language like he had studied it for years. She recovered quickly, giving the formal response. "Commander Chun, I acknowledge your greeting." He straightened and met her eyes. Up close, she could see that his brown eyes held intelligence and something else. Sadness, perhaps. Or weariness. "I know this situation is not ideal for either of us," he said quietly, still in Kelvari. "But I hope we can at least try to make it bearable. I brought you something." He gestured to a small table nearby. On it sat a clear container, like a tiny ecosystem. Inside were plants with delicate flowers in various colors, some pink, some yellow, some deep purple. "These are from Earth," he explained. "The flowers are called roses, tulips, and violets. I included a guide on how to care for them, written in Kelvari. I thought perhaps you might like to have something beautiful from my world in your quarters." Jathira stared at the gift. It was thoughtful, personal, not at all what she had expected from a barbaric human. She reached out slowly and picked up the container, looking at the delicate petals. "They are beautiful," she admitted. "I'm glad you think so," James said with a small smile. "Shall we proceed to dinner? I believe our respective delegations are eager to begin the formal negotiations." As they walked side by side toward the dining hall, Jathira found herself confused. This was not the monster she had been expecting. This was something entirely different, and she did not know what to make of it. The formal dinner was held in the grand hall of Epsilon Station. The table stretched long between the Kelvari delegation on one side and the human delegation on the other. Jathira sat at the head with James beside her, as was proper for the betrothed couple. Jathira watched James carefully throughout the meal. The Kelvari formal dinner had 17 different courses and dozens of small rules about which utensil to use, when to speak, and how to show appreciation to the cooks. One wrong move could be seen as a terrible insult. James navigated it all perfectly. He used the correct fork for the crystal fruits. He waited the proper amount of time before tasting each dish. He complimented the cooks in the right formal phrases. It was impressive, especially since humans had only known about Kelvari culture for a few decades. "You learned our customs well," Jathira said quietly between courses. James looked at her and shrugged slightly. "I had 3 months to prepare. I spent most of it studying. It seemed important to show respect to your culture if I was going to become part of it." 3 months? Jathira felt her eyes widen. "You learned all of this in 3 months?" Humans are good at adapting quickly, James said with a slight smile. We have to be. We don't have centuries to master things slowly. Before Jathira could respond, one of the cavalry nobles across the table spoke up. His name was Varan, a warrior from one of the old families. He had made his disapproval of the marriage clear from the start. Tell me, human, Varan said, his tone mocking. Is it true that your people choose their own mates? That you marry for something called love? The table went quiet. It was a rude question, designed to embarrass. James did not look bothered. Yes, that is true. Most humans marry by choice. How chaotic, Varan continued. No wonder your people fight so much. Without proper family alliances, you must have constant conflicts. We do fight, James agreed calmly, but usually over ideas and principles, not family politics. We believe people should be free to choose their own path in life, including who they love. Love, Varan laughed. An emotion. You let emotions guide your most important decisions. How primitive. Jathira saw James's jaw tighten slightly, the first sign of anger he had shown. But his voice remained steady. Emotions are not weaknesses. They are what make life worth living. They drive us to create art, music, and literature. They push us to explore and discover. They make us fight for what matters and protect those we care about. Pretty words, Varan sneered. But I wonder if you can back them up. You humans are so small and soft. Do you even know how to fight? Or do you just hide behind your weapons? The other cavalry nobles shifted uncomfortably. Varan was crossing a line, but he was powerful enough that few would challenge him. I know how to fight, James said quietly. Prove it. Varan stood up. He was enormous, nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick gray scales. His muscles bulged under his formal robes. Unless you are afraid. James looked at Jathira, then at the human ambassador, who shook his head slightly. James turned back to Varan. I decline your challenge, James said formally. This is a diplomatic dinner, not an arena. Coward, Varan spat. I decline your challenge, James repeated, his voice still calm. Weak human coward, Varan said louder. I knew your kind were not worthy of a cavalry princess. I decline your challenge, James said a third time. By cavalry law, 3 refusals meant the challenge must be dropped, or it became a matter of honor that required a formal response. Varan smiled cruelly. You hide behind our laws like a child. Fight me, human, or admit you are nothing but a scared animal. Slowly, James stood. Jathira could see the change in his posture. The calm diplomat disappeared, replaced by something harder. Very well, James said, since you insist. But we do this properly. No weapons. No armor. Simple combat. They moved to an open space near the dining hall. The nobles and diplomats formed a circle around them. Jaira felt her heart racing. Varan was a trained warrior who had won dozens of formal duels. James was going to be hurt badly, possibly killed. Varan charged immediately, using his size and strength to try to overwhelm James. But James was not there when Varan reached where he had been standing. He had moved aside with incredible speed, causing Varan to stumble forward. Before Varan could turn, James struck. His fist hit a nerve cluster on Varan's shoulder, making the big warrior's arm go numb. Then James swept Varan's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. Varan roared in anger and scrambled up, more careful now. He threw a punch that could have shattered stone. James dodged and countered with a series of rapid strikes to Varan's weak points, spots between the scales where nerves were exposed. The fight lasted 3 minutes. To Jathira, it felt like an hour. James moved like water, flowing around Varan's powerful attacks and responding with precise, controlled strikes. It was not the brutal combat Kelvari warriors used. It was something different. Something beautiful in its efficiency. Finally, James found an opening. He ducked under a wild swing and struck Varan hard in the chest, right where the two hearts met. The impact made Varan gasp and collapse, unable to breathe properly. James stood over him, not even breathing hard. He offered his hand to help Varan up. Varan stared at the hand in shock, then took it. James pulled him to his feet. "You fought well," James said in formal Kelvari. "Your strength is impressive. I hope we can share drinks as allies rather than enemies." Varan looked confused, as if he could not understand why James was being kind after defeating him. Slowly, he nodded. "You have earned respect, human." "I judged too quickly." James smiled and clapped him on the shoulder. "Then let me buy you that drink and we start over." The tension in the room broke. Several nobles began talking at once, surprised and impressed. The human delegation looked relieved. Jathura found herself staring at James as he returned to the table. He sat down and picked up his glass of water as if nothing unusual had happened. "You fight very well," she said quietly. "Thank you. My grandfather taught me something called judo when I was young. Then I learned other martial arts during my military service. Humans believe in using an opponent's strength against them rather than trying to overpower them. That is very wise. We have to be wise. We are not as strong or as long-lived as many species we meet in the galaxy. So we adapt. We find other ways to succeed." After dinner, Jathura returned to her quarters with the small terrarium James had given her. She set it carefully on a table and activated her computer again. She searched for information about human culture, but this time she was not looking for military records. She found human music and was shocked by its beauty and variety. She found human art and saw paintings and sculptures that rivaled the greatest Kelvari works. She found human literature and began reading a translation of something called poetry. One poem made her stop. It was about love and loss, written by a human named Rainer Maria Rilke. The words were beautiful and sad and full of deep feeling. She read it 3 times, trying to understand how such emotion could be captured in language. Humans were not the simple, violent creatures she had been told about. They were complex. They felt things deeply and expressed those feelings through art and words and actions. She thought about James, about how he had learned her language in 3 months, how he had given her flowers and a thoughtful gift, how he had fought with controlled precision and then shown mercy and friendship to his opponent. Jathura looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time since learning about the arranged marriage, she felt something other than dread. She felt curiosity, and perhaps, just perhaps, the smallest bit of hope. The marriage negotiations took 3 weeks. During that time, Jathura and James were expected to spend time together, to begin building the relationship that would serve as the foundation for the alliance between their peoples. At first, Jathura approached these meetings with duty in mind. She would be polite, respectful, and formal. Nothing more than necessary. But James made that difficult. On their 3rd meeting, he brought a small device and asked if she liked music. When she said yes, he played something called a piano sonata. The music was gentle and sad and beautiful. She found herself closing her eyes and just listening, feeling the emotions the music carried. "That was lovely," she said when it ended. "Who performed it?" "I did," James said quietly. "I recorded it last week. Playing helps me think. You play that instrument?" Jathura looked at him with new surprise. "I learned as a child. I am not great at it, but I enjoy it. Music is important to humans. It helps us process feelings we cannot put into words." Over the following days, Jathura learned more about James. He painted watercolor pictures of places he had visited. He read poetry in multiple languages including some Kelvari poems she had not read herself. He knew history and philosophy and spoke thoughtfully about complex ideas, but he also listened. He asked her about Kelvari culture, not in the way of a diplomat studying facts, but with genuine interest. He wanted to know about her childhood, her favorite foods, what she liked to do when she was not being a princess. "I enjoy crystal singing," she told him one day as they walked through the station's observation deck, looking at the stars. "It is a Kelvari art form. We use our vocal resonance to make crystals vibrate in patterns that create light and sound together." "That sounds amazing," James said. "Would you show me sometime?" No one had ever asked to see her crystal singing before. It was considered a private art, something done for personal meditation. But she found herself wanting to share it with him. "Perhaps," she said carefully. "If we have time, I would like that very much." On the 10th day, something happened that changed everything. Alarms screamed through the station. Pirates had attacked, breaking through the outer defenses. They were after the valuable cargo holds and did not care about the diplomatic meeting happening inside. The security forces rushed to defend the station, but the pirates were well armed and coordinated. Explosions rocked the corridors. People ran in panic. James immediately moved into action. He located the security commander and quickly assessed the situation. 3 pirate ships had docked at different points. They were moving toward the main cargo bays, but had also cut off the evacuation routes. "We have civilians trapped in Section 7, the commander said, his voice tight, "including Kelvari children from a school group that was visiting. But we do not have enough forces to reach them and defend the cargo bays." "Forget the cargo," James said firmly. "Get those children out. I will take a team to Section 7. "You are a diplomat, not a soldier," the commander protested. James looked at him with hard eyes. "I was a soldier before I was a diplomat. I know what I am doing. Get me 5 volunteers and clear a path as far as you can." Jathira stepped forward. "I will go with you." "Princess, no," the commander began, but Jathira cut him off. "I am trained in combat. I can help. And those are my people trapped in there." James looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay close to me." We move fast and quiet. The team of 7 moved through the damaged corridors carefully. James led them with calm confidence, checking corners and planning their route to avoid the main pirate forces. Jathira watched him work and saw the military commander. He had been before becoming a diplomat. They reached Section 7 and found the area blocked by debris from an explosion. Beyond the wreckage, they could hear voices crying for help. Children's voices. "The structure is unstable," one of the security officers said. "If we blast through, we might cause a collapse." James studied the debris carefully. "We dig through by hand, carefully. Princess, you and I will start. The rest of you watch for pirates." For the next 20 minutes, James and Jathira worked together, moving pieces of metal and stone. James's hands were bleeding from the sharp edges, but he did not slow down. Jathira's scales protected her better, but she could feel the strain in her muscles. Finally, they created an opening large enough to crawl through. On the other side, they found 12 Kelvari children huddled with 2 teachers. All were terrified, but unharmed. "We are going to get you out," James said in gentle Kelvari. "But you must be very quiet and very brave." "Can you do that?" The children nodded, their eyes wide. They began moving the children through the opening one at a time. James went through first to help lift them, while Jathira guided them from the other side. They were almost done when the pirates found them. 5 armed raiders came around the corner, their weapons raised. James immediately pushed the last child behind him and drew his sidearm. "Get them out," he shouted to Jathira. "Now." The firefight was brief but intense. James and the security team held the pirates back while Jathira rushed the children and teachers toward safety. But one pirate got a clear shot at James, and the energy bolt hit him in the side. James went down hard, his body crashing against a wall. Jathara heard herself scream his name. Without thinking, she charged back toward him, grabbing a fallen weapon and firing with deadly accuracy. The pirate fell. She reached James and knelt beside him. The wound was bad, burning through his suit and into his flesh. His face was pale, and he was struggling to breathe. "The children," he gasped. "Are they safe?" "Yes," Jathara said, her hands shaking as she tried to stop the bleeding. "They are safe." "You saved them." "Good," James whispered. Then his eyes closed. The medical team arrived minutes later and rushed James to the station's hospital. The surgery took 4 hours. Jathara waited outside the entire time, refusing to leave, refusing to eat or drink. Her attendants tried to convince her to rest, but she would not move. When the doctor finally came out, she stood quickly. "How is he?" "He will live," the doctor said. But it was close. The burn damaged several organs. If he had been hit a few centimeters to the left, we could not have saved him. Jathara felt her legs go weak with relief. "Can I see him?" "He is sleeping, but yes." She went into the room quietly. James lay on the medical bed, his chest wrapped in bandages, various tubes connected to him. He looked small and fragile, so unlike the confident man who had faced Varan or led the rescue mission. She sat in the chair next to the bed and took his hand carefully. His skin was warm and soft without scales. She could feel his pulse, fast and light like a small bird. "You are a fool," she whispered. "You could have died. For what?" "For children you do not even know." But she knew the answer. He had told her himself during one of their conversations. That's what you do for people who matter. All people. Humans did not distinguish between their own kind and others when it came to protecting the innocent. Their short lives made them treasure all life, not just their own. Their strong emotions drove them to acts of incredible courage and compassion. Jathara sat there for hours, holding his hand, watching him breathe. And she realized something that both terrified and thrilled her. She cared about this human, not because of duty or alliance or political necessity. She cared about James Chun as a person. She cared about his safety, his happiness, his life. When had that happened? When had he stopped being the dreaded arranged marriage and become someone she wanted to know better, to protect, to be close to? When James finally woke, his eyes found her immediately. He smiled weakly. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough. "Of course I stayed," Jathara replied. "Someone had to make sure you did not do anything else foolish. Are the children really safe?" "Yes, all of them." "Thanks to you." "Thanks to us," James corrected. "You came back for me." "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Jathara said softly. She squeezed his hand gently. "Rest now. We can talk later." As James drifted back to sleep, Jathara allowed herself to admit the truth she had been avoiding. She was falling in love with her future husband. And that changed everything. James recovered slowly over the next 2 weeks. Jathara visited him every day, bringing him books and music and updates about the wedding preparations. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about Earth, about the oceans and mountains and cities. She told him about Kelver, about the crystal forests and the singing, caves and the ancient temples. The wedding was scheduled to take place on Epsilon Station in a grand ceremony that would be broadcast across both empires. It would be the largest diplomatic event in decades, with representatives from dozens of worlds attending. But not everyone was happy about the union. On Kelver, some of the old noble families saw the human alliance as a threat to their power. They preferred isolation, keeping the empire pure and controlled. On Earth, Certain political groups opposed any treaty that gave aliens influence over human affairs. They wanted humanity to stand alone. These groups, working separately, came to the same conclusion. The wedding must not happen. Jathara learned about the threat 3 days before the ceremony. Her father's intelligence service had intercepted communications between Kalvari extremists and human separatists. They were planning something, but the details were unclear. "We should postpone," the Emperor said over the secure communication channel, "until we know the full extent of the conspiracy." "No," Jathara said firmly. "If we postpone, we show weakness. We show that terrorists can control us. The wedding happens as planned. Daughter, this is not about pride. Your life is at risk, and the human's life. Father, if we give in to fear, we have already lost. James showed me that courage means doing what is right, even when it is dangerous. The wedding will proceed." When she told James about the threat, he looked worried but not surprised. "I expected something like this," he said. "Big changes always have opposition. The question is what we do about it." "Security will be tripled," Jathara said. "Every guest will be screened. The ceremony will be held in the most secure section of the station. That might not be enough if they have people on the inside. We need to be ready for anything." On the day of the wedding, the grand hall was filled with hundreds of guests. The walls were decorated with both Kalvari crystals and earth flowers, blending the two cultures beautifully. Musicians from both worlds played together, creating something new and wonderful. Jathara wore traditional Kalvari wedding armor, silver and blue, with the crest of the royal family etched across the chest plate. James wore a formal human suit, black with a blue tie that matched her armor. He looked handsome and calm, though she could see the tension in his shoulders. The ceremony began with the traditional Kalvari vows. Jathara spoke them clearly, her voice carrying through the hall. Then came the human vows, and James spoke them with equal strength. They were halfway through the bonding ritual when the first explosion hit. The blast came from the east wall, tearing through the decorations and sending guests scrambling for cover. Immediately, more explosions followed, coordinated and deadly. Armed attackers rushed into the hall from multiple entrances, their faces covered, their weapons firing indiscriminately. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed and ran. Security forces engaged the attackers, but they were outnumbered and caught off guard. Bodies fell. Both Kalvari and human. James grabbed Zathira and pulled her behind the ceremonial altar, shielding her with his body as energy bolts flew overhead. "We need to get you out of here," he said urgently. "No," Jathira said, her voice hard. "If we run, we let them win. This is exactly what they want, to show that our union creates chaos and death. Jathira, you could die, so could you. So could everyone here. That is why we must fight." She grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard and checked its charge. "You taught me that courage means protecting what matters. These people matter. Our future matters. We fight." James looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. He drew his own weapon. Together then, they moved out from behind the altar. James's tactical training took over, his mind processing the battlefield with cold efficiency. He identified the enemy positions and their strategy. "They are trying to seal the exits," he said quickly. "They want to trap everyone and take hostages. We need to stop them from completing the perimeter." "The East Corridor," Jathira said. "If we can retake it, security can bring reinforcements through." "Exactly. Can you provide cover while I flank them?" "Yes, go." They split up, working in perfect coordination, despite having never fought together before. Jathira's warrior training combined with James's tactical thinking made them deadly. She drew the attackers' attention with heavy fire while James circled around and hit them from behind. The leader of the attackers was a large Kalvari in black armor. He was shouting orders and seemed to be coordinating the entire assault. James saw him and made a decision. "Cover me," he called to Jathira. "I am going for the leader." Before she could protest, James was moving, running low and fast across the hall. Energy bolts burned the air around him, but he did not slow. He reached the leader and engaged him in hand-to-hand combat. The leader was strong and skilled, but James was faster and more creative. He used the chaos of the battle to his advantage, leading the leader away from his troops and into a dead-end corridor. "You think you can stop us, human?" The leader snarled in cavalry. "You think your little alliance will survive?" "Yes," James said simply, "because it is built on something stronger than fear or hate. It is built on hope and trust and the belief that we are better together than apart." He disarmed the leader with a quick twist and knocked him unconscious with a strike to the nerve cluster. Then he secured him with restraints and rushed back to help Jathira. But he was too late to see the sniper. Hidden in the upper balcony, a human terrorist had James in his sights. The sniper's finger tightened on the trigger, the weapon aimed at James's head. Jathira saw it happen as if in slow motion. She screamed James's name and threw herself forward, her body moving faster than she thought possible. She hit James from the side, pushing him out of the way. The energy bolt meant for his head hit her instead, striking her shoulder and spinning her to the ground. Pain exploded through her body, white-hot and overwhelming. She heard James shouting, felt him pulling her to safety behind a pillar. Security forces had found the sniper and taken him down, but it was too late. "Jathira, stay with me," James said, his voice breaking. His hands pressed against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Medical team. I need a medical team now." "The leader," Jathira gasped through the pain. "Did you get him?" "Yes, he is secure." "Do not worry about that. Just hold on, James." She reached up and touched his face. "I am glad I met you. I am glad this was not just duty." "Stop talking like that," James said fiercely. "You are not dying. I will not let you die." Medical teams arrived and began emergency treatment. The battle was ending, security forces finally overwhelming the attackers. Those who were not killed were captured, both Kelvari and human extremists found among them. As Jathira was loaded onto a medical transport, she saw James try to follow, but his own injuries from earlier were bleeding again, and he collapsed before he could take 3 steps. The last thing Jathira saw before the pain medication took her was James being lifted onto another transport, his hand reaching toward her. Hours later, after surgery and stabilization, Jathira woke in the medical bay. Her shoulder was bandaged and numb, but she was alive. Immediately, she asked about James. "He is alive," Shira told her, sitting beside her bed. "His old injuries reopened during the fight, and he lost a lot of blood. But he will recover. I want to see him. Princess, you need to rest. Now." They brought her to James's room in a wheelchair. He was awake, lying in bed looking pale but alert. When he saw her, his face flooded with relief. "You are alive," he breathed. "So are you." She wheeled herself close to his bed and took his hand. "We survived. Because of you. You saved my life, again. You saved mine first. And you saved all those children. And you stopped the attack leader. I think we are even." James laughed weakly. "I suppose we are." He squeezed her hand. "Jathira, I know this started as an arranged marriage. I know you did not choose this. But somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real. What we are building together became real. I need you to know that." Jathira felt tears form in her eyes, something Kelvari rarely did. "It became real for me too. I feared this marriage so much. I thought I was being forced to bind myself to a stranger, to a species I did not understand. But you showed me who humans really are. You showed me courage and kindness and beauty. You made me feel things I did not know I could feel. What do we do now?" James asked softly. "Now?" Jathara smiled through her tears. "Now we finish what we started. We get married. For real. Not just for politics or duty, but because we want to." James smiled back. "I would like that very much." Outside the medical bay, news of the attack spread across both empires. The conspirators had been caught and would face trial. But more importantly, the story of how the princess and the commander fought side by side to save their guests became legend. The wedding would proceed. And this time, everyone would know it was built on more than just political necessity. It was built on love. The rescheduled wedding took place 2 weeks later. Both Jathira and James had recovered enough to stand, though they were still healing. The grand hall had been repaired and was more beautiful than before, a symbol of how something broken could be made stronger. This time, security was flawless. Every entrance was guarded, every guest verified multiple times. But the atmosphere was different. The people who attended were not just there for politics anymore. They were there to witness something that had become much more than a simple alliance. Jathara stood before the gathered crowd, James beside her. She wore the same silver and blue armor, now bearing scars from the attack. James wore his black suit, and she noticed he had chosen to wear a small pin on his lapel, a crystal flower she had given him during one of their many conversations. Before the traditional vows began, Jathara asked permission to speak. The officiant nodded, and she turned to face the crowd, her voice amplified so all could hear. "I want to tell you all a story," she began. "It is the story of a princess who feared her arranged marriage. She feared it because she had been told terrible things about the species she would marry into. She was told they were primitive and violent. She was told they were too emotional to be trusted. She was told they lived such short lives that they could not think of the future." She paused, looking at James. He smiled at her with warm eyes. "But when I met my future husband, I learned that everything I had been told was wrong. Yes, humans are emotional. But their emotions are not weaknesses. They are their greatest strength. They love with an intensity that moves mountains. They create beauty that rivals anything in the galaxy. They dream impossible dreams and then make them real through pure determination." Jathira's voice grew stronger. "Yes, humans live shorter lives than Kelvari. But that does not make them short-sighted. It makes them treasure every moment. It makes them fight for what matters. It makes them value each person they meet, each connection they form, each day they are given." She gestured around the hall. 2 weeks ago, extremists attacked us because they feared change. They feared unity. They feared that bringing our peoples together would weaken us. But they were wrong. When the attack came, it was not division that saved us. It was unity. Kelvari and humans fought together, bled together, protected each other. Jathira turned back to James. "My husband-to-be showed me true courage. He learned my language in 3 months. He respected my culture when it would have been easier not to. He risked his life to save children who were not his own species. He stood with me in battle when he could have run to safety." She reached out and took his hand. "I feared this marriage because I did not understand. But now I know the truth. True strength is not measured in scales or centuries. It is measured in character, in compassion, in the courage to stand for what is right, even when it is difficult. My husband has shown me all of these things." Her voice softened, but it carried clearly through the hall. "Today I marry not just for alliance or duty. Today I marry because I have found someone who challenges me, who compliments me, who makes me want to be better. Today I marry for love." The crowd was silent, captivated. Then, slowly, applause began. It started with the human delegation, then spread to some of the younger Kelvari nobles, then to more and more people until the entire hall was filled with the sound. James stepped forward, and the applause quieted. He looked nervous, which Jathara found endearing. "I am not as good at speeches as my future wife," he began with a small smile. "But I want to say something too. When I learned about this assignment, I expected to do my duty and nothing more. I expected a cold political arrangement. I expected to spend my life with someone who would always see me as lesser because of my species." He looked directly at Jathira. "But you never made me feel lesser. You listened when I spoke. You treated my culture with respect. You saw past the differences to the person underneath. You taught me that honor and wisdom are not unique to any one species. They are qualities any person can have if they choose to develop them." James's voice grew stronger. "The cavalry have a saying, 'The strongest crystal is forged under the greatest pressure.' I believe that is true for alliances as well. We have faced pressure and violence and fear, but instead of breaking, we have become stronger. Together." He turned to address the crowd. "Some of you still doubt this union. I understand that. Change is scary. But I promise you this, Jathira and I will work every day to prove that our peoples are stronger together than apart. We will build bridges instead of walls. We will show that differences can be strengths instead of weaknesses." James looked back at Jathira. "And I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of the woman who gave me a second chance at happiness, who showed me that even after loss, there can be love again." Jathira felt tears forming again. She did not try to hide them. The ceremony proceeded with both cavalry and human traditions woven together. They exchanged vows in both languages. They performed the cavalry bonding ritual, where they placed their hands together and spoke the ancient words. They performed the human tradition of exchanging rings, small bands of crystal and metal that symbolized eternity. When the officiant finally announced them married, the crowd erupted in genuine celebration. Musicians began playing, a fusion of cavalry crystal harmonics and human instruments that created something entirely new. At the reception, Jathira and James moved through the crowd together, speaking with guests from both empires. Varan, the warrior James had fought at their first meeting, approached them with a formal bow. "I was wrong about you, human," Varan said directly. "I judged without knowledge. You have proven yourself a warrior and a worthy match for our princess. I ask your forgiveness." James clasped his arm in the Kelvari manner. "There is nothing to forgive. You protected your princess the only way you knew. I respect that. I hope we can be allies now." "More than allies," Varan said with a rare smile. "Friends." As the celebration continued, Jathira's father approached. The emperor looked tired but pleased. "You have done well, daughter," he said quietly. "Better than I could have hoped. This alliance will change the galaxy." "It already has, father," Jathira replied. The alliance was supposed to be about trade routes and political power, but it became about something more important. It became about understanding, about seeing past our preconceptions to the truth underneath. The emperor nodded slowly. "You are wiser than I was at your age. The empire will be strong in your hands someday." Later, when the celebration finally wound down, Jathira and James stood on a private balcony overlooking the station. Below them, they could see Kelvari and human workers repairing the last of the damage from the attack, working side by side and laughing together. "Do you think it will last?" Jathira asked quietly. "What we have started?" "I do," James said. "It will not be easy. There will be more resistance, more challenges, but we have proven it is possible. We have shown both our peoples that unity is not just a political strategy. It is something real and powerful and worth fighting for." "I am glad I met you, James Chun," Jathira said, leaning against him. "I am glad I had the courage to see past my fear." "I am glad I met you too," James replied, wrapping his arm around her. "You showed me that my life was not over after loss, that there was still beauty and love and purpose to be found." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. 5 years passed. The alliance between the Calvary Empire and the Terran Federation had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Trade routes were open and prosperous. Joint scientific missions had made breakthrough discoveries. Cultural exchange programs had brought Calvary and human artists, scholars, and students together. And Jathira and James had become symbols of that unity. They had established the Bridgekeeper Initiative, an organization dedicated to promoting understanding between species. They sponsored schools where Calvary and human children learned together. They funded art projects that blended cultural traditions. They spoke at conferences across the galaxy about the power of looking past differences. Their family had grown. They had 2 children, a daughter named Mira, who had inherited Jathira's blue scales and James's brown eyes, and a son named Kai, who had his father's tan skin and his mother's natural strength. Both children were brilliant and curious, speaking both Calvary and human languages fluently, belonging fully to both cultures. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, they sat for an interview with a Galactic News Network reporter. The interview would be broadcast across dozens of worlds. "Princess Jathira," the reporter began, "5 years ago, you gave a famous speech about fearing your arranged marriage. Looking back now, what would you tell that younger version of yourself?" Jathira smiled, holding James's hand. "I would tell her that fear comes from ignorance, and the cure for ignorance is curiosity. I would tell her to ask questions instead of accepting assumptions. I would tell her that the person she is afraid to meet will become the most important person in her life." The reporter turned to James. "And Commander Chun, what advice would you give to others facing similar situations, being pushed together by politics or duty when they come from very different backgrounds?" James thought for a moment. "I would say that our differences are not obstacles to overcome.